And this book was really inspired by me going broke during the last recession. I mentioned like I got financially independent. Well, I came out of retirement to teach people how to do it. Well, during that period of time, as I'm working with some of these partners, one of them said, hey, you know what? You should really cut off these other streams of income and just focus on our mission of helping people. It could just be in your community, it could be in your family, of course, but I really view my family as being bigger than just my immediate family, with my wife and my 8 kids, right? It's really about something much bigger than that. Although it sounds hard to imagine it's bigger than 8 kids, but it is. It's how you show up to serve. And I think that's the real true definition of success is what kind of footprint are you going to leave on this planet? What kind of legacy will you leave? And how will you bless people's lives while you're here?
Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastroianni, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Bob Mastroianni. Today I have with me Chris Miles, and Chris refers to himself as the anti-financial advisor. Chris Miles is the cash flow expert and anti-financial advisor. He's a leading authority teaching entrepreneurs and professionals how to get their money working for them today. Chris has used his knowledge not once, but twice to become financially independent, where his passive income exceeded his expenses. Not to mention that he paid off his $1 million in debt after the last recession without filing bankruptcy. So I'm really excited to have Chris on the show today, and we're going to talk about his some of his investment strategies, and then also his book that he has released, The 7 Secrets to Free Up Cash Today, which is something that I'm really interested in learning about. So glad to have you on today, Chris. Thanks so much.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be here, Bob. By the way, I just realized if I close my eyes and listen to your voice, you sound like a slightly faster paced version of John Malkovich. I love it.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Totally. Yeah. It's cool.
Cool. Thank you. So tell me a little bit about your journey. And you spoke about becoming financially free twice. And for our investors on the Healthy Investor Podcast, oftentimes we have guests come on that talk about the idea of trying to become financially free, obviously when your passive income exceeds your expenses. So I guess maybe tell us a little bit about your journey and how you were able to do that.
Yeah. Well, the way you do it twice is you screw up the first time. That's the easiest way to do it. I don't recommend that, but it does serve to show that it can be done, right? And it wasn't just a one-time fluke thing for myself. So what we talk about does work. Interesting kind of journey that I had, right? Because when I started out, I didn't know a lot about money. My parents, they were the typical scarcity-driven, saver type parents. My dad was always saying things like, "We can't afford this. What do you think I am, made of money? Money doesn't grow on trees, And the worst one was, of course, when he would say, "I'm going to work this job until I'm dead. In fact, my job will kill me." And I thought, man, I don't want that life. I don't want to be caught in that kind of rat race. That's kind of like the poor dad version of life. So I decided as a kid, I didn't want to live that life. So I went to college because I was the first one to go to college. But then I realized that even then, there was people in the rat race in college. So with one class to go before I got my bachelor's, I dropped out of college with one class, right? Just one class left. And I was just taking a 1-year sabbatical. That was the plan because I wanted to go into business consulting. And I figured if I'm going to do that, I should have real business experience. Because a big thing for me is you should practice what you preach. So I actually go and try to figure out what I'm going to do. What kind of business should I start? The first one that came up was becoming a financial advisor. And I didn't know that they'd take anybody with a heartbeat that could pass a test with 70%, which, hey, I was in college. You can pass anything doing, BSing your way there, right? So I did. I became a financial advisor. Didn't have to have a lot of money and background. But, the thing is, I thought if I can learn about money, and that would be great for me, but it would also help my dad too. Maybe it would give him some of his life back and he wouldn't just have to work until he's dead. Well, I did that for several years. And then as I went into it, then my dad said, "Hey, we need to talk." And so rather than him always giving me financial advice, which was always, like the Dave Ramsey's, poster child, maybe older brother that Dave Ramsey looked up to would be my dad, which was, save everything, pay off all your debt. And that's what you should do to be free. Well, when he called me over to his house, he said, "Chris, I'm 61 years old. I want to retire at some point. Help me out here." I looked at his finances. I said, "Dad, let's just say this. You better hope you die in 5 years." because that's how much money you have left.
Huh.
And he said, well, Chris, that's not what I wanted to hear. I said, I know. Well, what do I do? I'm not sure, because you've done everything right. Everything that I teach as a financial advisor, you did it. You're maxing out your 401k. You paid off all your debt early. You're debt free. I mean, you're like Dave Ramsey's dream come true. And yet here you are, and you just don't have enough. It's just not enough. And that bugged me, and it bugged him obviously too, but it bugged me because I actually got into that business to help my dad, only to find out that he was already doing everything he was supposed to be doing. And I didn't have an answer for him as a financial advisor. There was nothing I could give him that I could say, yes, this will improve your situation. I can guarantee it, because you can't guarantee anything as a financial advisor. Well, when I started to look at that, and then I looked at the evidence, I started looking at all my other clients. Even the retired ones weren't financially free either. They were still worried about running out of money. And then I had a friend that was in real estate investing that pointed out something to me just a few weeks after I had my conversation with my dad. He said, Chris, how many of your clients, not just your clients, but how many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, not off the fees you've been charging, but actually doing these investments? As I really considered it, I realized there was guys that had been working in our office since the late 1970s, and yet they were not financially free either. I said, none. There was one guy I thought might have been. I found out he wasn't either. He was just all show, right? And that really upset me, because it was almost like everything I taught was a lie. And at that point, I had to make a choice. Either I keep going down the same path and do like what some of my other friends that are still in financial advising do, which is, hey, I'm getting paid $500,000 or millions a year in these fees to keep teaching this stuff that I know doesn't work, or do I stay in integrity and quit? So I chose the latter. I said, I can't do this anymore. I quit. But I got to do something. There's got to be a way to do it. And I found people that were in their 20s and 30s who are financially free. And I thought, how do they have enough passive income to retire in their 20s and 30s? I thought it would have been amazing if I did it by 40. And I was starting this journey in my 20s. Well, they were doing things like alternative investments, like real estate investing and things like that. As I started to learn what they did and start to essentially reject everything I was taught as a financial advisor, the next thing I know, later that year, I was able to become financially independent myself. And that kind of got me on the journey of starting to teach other people how to do it, because, well, whether I liked it or not, everybody kept asking me, Chris, how did you do it? So that's kind of what ended up being my thing. I love being a teacher, and that's what I've been doing since really right about before the last recession started, when I ended up going back in the rat race and had to do it a second time to become financially free.
Wow. Very cool story. So it definitely resonates with me, the idea of, helping your parents, helping your parents to make sure that they can retire. And, it's an interesting concept to me, retirement. I was at a real estate event, probably in the very beginning. I started out in 2008, and I think it was actually before I purchased my first investment property. And I remember one of the speakers saying, people don't retire from my industry. And I thought, well, that's interesting. What do you mean they don't retire? And the idea was, well, why do I need to retire when my passive income is already exceeding my expenses? So why would I walk away from that? Right. So it's just a different way of thinking. And, I look at many retirees, there's some statistics out there today that there are a lot of people who believe that within the next 10 years, there's going to be the biggest transition of wealth. As baby boomers are aging, right. And, they sort of followed the line of really, they're the last generation of the pension, right? They're the last generation of the, long-term savings, and many of them invested properly. But, I look at people who are retired now, and I see it in family and friends, and I see it in others that I've met along the way that, maybe they have a fixed income, right? The idea of a fixed income in today's economy, you get the same check every month. There's no wiggle room. And then all of a sudden we start talking about something like inflation.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden retirees are sort of stuck, right? It's like,
That's right.
I get X amount of dollars every month, and X amount of dollars is supposed to take care of my living expenses, my feeding expenses. And, maybe I throw a little bit of entertainment in there. And then all of a sudden, all of those expenses have now increased, and then you're stuck. And, for my wife and I, we sort of have a passion to try and help others to make sure that they don't fall into this position. And I feel like you're sort of following that same realm. So this definitely resonates with me. So, very cool.
Yeah,
Definitely
you've probably
cool.
heard like people talk about FIRE, right? Financially independent, retire early, and a lot of them are trying to do it with mutual funds, and they're like, "I'm there." Well, they still believe in the 4% rule, right? Which is you can live on 4% of whatever you have. So if you have $1 million, 4% to 40,000 a year, you're living on. So they're like, "How can I live as cheaply?" They can't afford chips as cheaply and simply as they can, right? And then of course they can be financially independent. But the truth is, and you admitted it with inflation and everything else, really, other companies have come out and saying, no, it's not 4%. It really shouldn't be more than 3% you're pulling off from mutual funds, especially with the way that interest rates are working between inflation and what the real returns are when you're in retirement. It's not that great. So you got to keep it 3%. So think about it. Even if you save $1 million, you're living on 30,000 a year. I mean, that's below the poverty line. You're a broke millionaire. Why would you do that? And we're so much different when we talk about alternative investments, where you have double-digit returns instead. Now that $1 million turns into 6 figures a year, and maybe with some tax benefits versus 30,000 a year, and then you get taxed on it. So you say, "Wow, I'm living on 2,000 a month. How can I afford that if inflation is going to kick my butt?"
Right. Yeah. So interesting, and I want to jump into this because you and I spoke about this a little bit before we started, but you recently wrote a book. You have an online book, The 7 Secrets to Free Up Cash Today. And I think in what I'm hearing a bit in today's current investing environment, I've spoken to people that have said, I'm interested in investing, but I'm not exactly sure where I'm going to get money from. Where do I have money? What do my assets look like? So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about what some of your advice is based on your book.
Yeah, I call the book Beyond Rice and Beans. It's kind of like a slap in Dave Ramsey's face a little bit, because there's an abundant way to do this versus the scarcity way, right? Scarcity is always driven out of fear. There's never enough. And you can never have financial freedom in scarcity. There has to be that abundance level. You got to be a wise steward of the money that you have. And this book was really inspired by me going broke during the last recession. I mentioned like I got financially independent. Well, I came out of retirement to teach people how to do it. Well, during that period of time, as I'm working with some of these partners, one of them said, "Hey, you know what? You should really cut off these other streams of income and just focus on our mission of helping people." And I said, "Yeah, that's a brilliant idea." Not realizing, I'm just taking myself out of the rat race, out of being financially independent. I'm taking myself out to now working in a business because he wants me to be 100% committed to that versus my other investments. So I did that. Mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 is I started being overconfident during that time. I was in my, I was like 29 years old at the time. And I thought I could do anything. I had the Midas touch, and everything I touched turns to gold. So I started like gambling on my real estate. Who cares if it's negative cash flow? If as long as it appreciates, we're good. Which is what people thought in 2021. And that's what hurt them in 2022. And now going into 2023, you have real estate investors that are having a hard time, especially the younger ones, because they got overconfident, focused on appreciation. So I cut off streams of income, right? I wasn't focused on cash flow. And then I didn't keep my cash reserves available. I ended up putting a lot of my money into my house because I thought I can always pull it out in a home equity line of credit if I need it, not realizing that during that recession, no bank wanted to lend you money. So between that and then of course our business starting that off, and then it got hit pretty hard by the recession. This whole perfect storm. It was like the George Clooney version of Perfect Storm that would kill you, right? Sorry, spoiler alert. But that kind of perfect storm that combined, and I was in the hole over $16,000 a month between my business and my personal finances. So I went from millionaire to upside down millionaire in about a year or so, and especially as values started dropping and things like that. Well, I didn't want to file for bankruptcy, even though that would have been way easier just to hit that reset button. But I didn't do it because I'm stubborn. So I was trying to find a way out of it. So these 7 secrets are actually the things that I learned for myself, because people kept asking me. They said, "Chris, I'd love to learn how to get out of the rat race like you did." Although I'm like, well, not anymore. But I can't afford to pay you because I don't have the money. And in the back of my mind, also when I was thinking like, well, not anymore, I was thinking, well, I can guarantee they have more money than I do because they're probably not $1 million in debt because I'm $1 million more broke than the homeless guy on the street. So their situation's easy. And so I told them, I said, listen, if I can help you find the money, would you pay me? And they said, yes. And so I would start to do that. I would use the creative, resourceful things I was doing in my own situation to help dig out of that hole that I applied to their situation. And people would start finding on average like $35,000 a year, right? So for example, one of the very first things I tell people to do in that book is start tracking your money. Because one of the things I stopped doing was tracking my money, even though everything was abundant, everything was great. Money's coming in. It's just like air. Once air is taken away, then you count every breath. When money's taken away, you start counting every dollar. It's better to do that when it's not taken away, right? Do that from the beginning. And so track your money, both income coming in and expenses going out, not just expenses, but both sides of the equation, because that's all you really have for cash flow is how do I, one, reduce expenses within reason, and then two, increase income. And that spread is where freedom is found. That distance in between is freedom. That's where that people get out of the rat race. So like tracking your money, start to look at things like, are there destructive expenses that aren't serving me anymore? Do I have these, monthly subscriptions that I forgot about that really I'm not using? Am I not, do I have this gym membership that I don't ever use? So why pay for it, right? If you're not going to use it, lose it, get rid of it, those kind of things. Actually, that's one of the advice for number 2 is if you're not going to use it, lose it, which is get rid of stuff, sell things off, donate them, get the tax benefit or whatever it might be, simplify. So basically sell your crap is number 2. So 1, track your money. 2, sell your crap. 3, get rid of duplicate insurances and or raise deductibles. A lot of people don't realize if you raise deductibles on different types of insurances, the premium goes down and you can still have catastrophic coverage. But again, if I'm going to self-insure for anything, I want to self-insure for the small stuff, that deductible or that copay or whatever it might be, but then put the insurance company at risk for all the bigger catastrophic things in life. And so we've had people free up money, sometimes $900 a month, just doing that kind of strategy. Other things you could do too is stop funding that stupid 401k. I'm in shock with sometimes when people fund a 401k, but then they're also charging up a credit card. Like I can guarantee you that 401k, even with that quote unquote 50% or 100% match, will not exceed what you will be paying on the interest of those credit cards. The stock market's too stupid, especially when you deal with mutual funds. And the match doesn't, long-term, the match only adds maybe about 2% a year to your total return, your compounded return. Not 100%, not 50%, 2. Maybe 3 if you're lucky. But most of the time it's usually about 2% because of how compounding interest actually works. Whatever the match you get, if you have 100% match, just so you know, at the end, you'll just have double of what you would have paid doing yourself anyways. So that compounding return gets less and less the longer you have of that, based on the rule of 72. So for example, if you work for 36 years, divide it into 72, that means it's a 2% for 36 years is what doubles your money, right? So just like if you put your money at the bank for 36 years at 2%, it'll double. Well, guess what? The match actually works against you because it only matches on new money. So if you get 100% match, which a lot of people aren't getting anymore, but even if you get 100% match, guess what? If you're doing this for 36 years, that only adds maybe 2% to your total return. And those that are max funding, even less. It's even worse. So stop the 401k. Other things like debt. This is something I had to get really creative with, right? On debt, this one, like I use a formula I actually created while I was going broke. I was trying to figure out, if with whatever little cash I have, do I pay off debt or do I invest it, right? And it's not just as simple as looking at the interest rate because it's not the same. Really what you want to look at is, especially if you're paycheck to paycheck, you want to figure out what gives me the most money month to month, what benefits my life better. Well, I started creating my own index with debt called a cash flow index. And what it is, you take the loan balance, divide it by the minimum monthly payment, and you'll get a number. So for example, say you have 2 different loans at $10,000 a piece. One's a car loan, that's at $500 a month. The other's credit card, although higher interest, is only $200 a month. Now, from a common sense standpoint, if you're looking to say, how do I ensure that I have more money every month? Which one would you pay off? The $200 a month credit card or the $500 a month car loan? You want to pay off the car loan, right? Like that $500 a month is a huge benefit to your cash flow. Even if it's lower interest and you still have that high interest credit card, you want to pay that off. Now, someone who's been trained as in the traditional, Wall Street / Dave Ramsey mindset, right? They'll tell you, don't you dare, because that's what the banks always tell you to do. They want you to pay off the debt as fast as they can so they can go leverage your money faster. But again, it's about the cash flow. How much monthly income or expense does it free up? So that 10,000 divided by that 500 payment is a 20 index, while the credit card 10,000 divided by 200 is a 50 index. Therefore, the lower the index number, the more you want to pay it off. So I pay off the lowest index first. That's the one I pay off. Pay off the lowest index, and that frees up the most cash with the least amount of dollars out of pocket. Or in other words, the biggest ROI on your cash, right? So when I started using that, then I started prioritizing, especially when I had so many debts, so many collectors and collections coming in and judgments, all that kind of stuff. Ultimately, I was looking at what's going to affect my monthly cash flow. And so I would pay off the ones that had the lowest index score. And then as I pay that off, I would roll up to the next one, the next highest one, especially if it was below a 40. 40 and below is kind of like that red alert type place where it's, oh, this is significant. Even a 50 is not bad. 50, the only way to get the same return of a 50 index is to get a 2% per month investment, right? So, because really a 50, if say that's the same thing with a credit card. You have $10,000, you free up $200 a month. That's $2,400 a year, or a 24% rate of return on your money, right? On 10,000. So many times people are like, well, I want to invest. I had one client who that was her thing. She didn't have a lot to invest. She had 18 grand and she wanted to use that as a down payment on her first investment property. I said, well, okay, that's cool. Well, just so you know, with 18 grand, we might, even in those conditions before when the interest rates were lower, I said, you might pull off $200 a month with that 18 grand down. Or I said, we can take 6 grand of that money. We can refinance this one loan over here, take 6 grand, pay this off. And in total, we can actually free up about $700 a month. So with that, it was like 6 grand to free up $700 a month with her personal debt situation, which also put them in a better debt to income ratio, which gave them the better interest rate when they eventually went to buy their house, which they were able to save up that money just like 6 months later. So the cool thing is they didn't just make an extra $200 a month of passive income. They freed up $700, while then just a matter of months later, added that $200 a month anyways. Now they had $900 a month, better cash flow improvement. So it's things like that. Again, and that's kind of part of those 7 steps of just how do you really get the money to do the best possible? Because ultimately what we want is you want to get to the place where you work because you want to, not because you have to, right? Where your work optional. And that's ultimately what this tries to teach you. So even if I'm sure you're probably not over $1 million in debt and broke like I was. You probably will learn something from that book. And it's only like a half-hour read anyways on moneyripples.com.
Well, that's great. That's great. A lot of cool information. Especially, the 401k thing is it's a very interesting question because I think people struggle with it. They go back and forth because, right, of course, I used to work in HR and benefits, and I know the HR and benefits department is like, oh, don't miss out on your 401k, right? They're going to, for every dollar you put in, we're going to put another dollar in for you also. And, and so that's a portion of it. Right. And then, very interesting to hear you talk about comparing the debt of your interest on your credit cards and then versus your 401k. So that's a pretty cool concept. I'm going to go back and sort of utilize your index there and sort of see where I am, because that's a very interesting concept to me of, sometimes, and I think many of us do this, we get into the realm of like, okay, I have some credit card debt. So, you get into that, almost that spinning, that spinning gerbil wheel of like, okay, which one has the highest interest? Start paying that one down. And then we do a transfer and then it's 0%. And then we're trying to pay it down. And then the real question is, what is that freeing up? What is that tying up? It's very interesting.
It's true. Like as an investor, you always want to see, really the biggest question you should be asking is, where's my profit, right? Like, where's that extra difference? Especially if you're going to use debt, right? If you're going to use debt to buy like a real estate property, you better make sure that the cash flow, the profits from that can more than pay that payment. Otherwise, it's not a good deal. Like you're losing cash flow, and negative cash flow is not a good thing in almost any situation. And that's true, even with what we're talking about here, right? Is like, we want to make sure it works. You mentioned like 0% credit cards. It's not uncommon when we do that whole cash flow index, comparing the different loan balances to their payments. it's interesting because often the 0% credit cards will have the lowest cash flow index, meaning that they make you pay more per month. Even if it's just principal, they're requiring you to pay more per month than even the card that might be at 20%. And so that's why I tell people, like, if you really start to compare, especially if it's even a better experiment if you have lots of different credit cards with different interest rates, you'll start to find out that the interest rate, the highest interest rate is not always the one you should pay off first. It's really the one that has the highest payment compared to the balance, that ratio. That's the cash flow index.
I like that. I like that concept. I'm gonna spend some time and I'm gonna try and figure out where my cash flow index is and see if there's some changes we need to make. That's pretty cool. So I want to transition over a little bit. This is the Healthy Investor Podcast. So we like to talk about any healthy habits or routines that you feel contribute to your success and to your growth. And you and I spoke before we started, and I think you have a pretty good one that you work on pretty regularly. So maybe we could talk about it a bit.
Yeah, I do morning routine every day. Everybody has their own version of what they call it. Tony Robbins called it the hour of power. I've heard people call it the power hour just to sound like they're unique. I've had people call it morning ritual, miracle morning, whatever you want to call it. All of us have some sort of routine, especially if you have some level of success. Even during my hardest times, when I was flat broke, that was the one thing that I kept doing as a non-negotiable, because the biggest thing you need to do, even as an investor, is you got to be able to control your mind. Because, especially when I was if you can imagine what it was like having collectors calling multiple times a day. My friends stopped calling me. My collectors call me all the time. Interesting point. I started calling them I love you calls just to recontextualize in my mind that the collectors were fun to talk to. So I'd be like, man, my friends stopped calling me, but you guys call me religiously. Man, it's like an old buddy. How you doing, guys? Good. We're here to collect a debt. So I would, the best way to get in that better frame of mind was to do that kind of ritual. I call it the 3 E's: exercise, education, and enlightenment. So really those 3 areas, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do the other, 2 areas, like your relationships, like texting your spouse, telling them you love them or what you love about them or whatever it might be, or, spending time with your kids and things like that. That's good too. I even do birthday wishes on Facebook every day, as part of my relationship part, but at least do the 3 E's. So exercise, I do that first because enlightenment can include things like prayer, meditation. It could be like yoga, which is kind of like exercise and enlightenment. It could be journal writing, whatever it might be. If I try to pray first thing in the morning, I fall asleep. So I have to get my body moving for even my brain to really wake up. And so I do exercise first. In fact, that's what got me to become a marathoner. I'm actually now starting to do like some of the world majors in marathon running and stuff right now. And that all started because I started doing running in the morning, because that was the only thing I could afford to do, because everything else required money. But, buying a bicycle to go biking might cost $1,000, but running shoes might cost $100. So I started running, and that's where I got into marathons. So doing something to get your body moving doesn't have to be marathons. It could be something with strength. It could be, like I said, yoga. It could be really just going out for a brisk walk. But something to get your body moving first and foremost. And then while I do it, go with my enlightenment part, in addition to like maybe reading scriptures or prayers or whatever it might be. I would even do a prayer of gratitude, just like counting my blessings, right? So you get yourself in that abundant, grateful place. Depending on the exercise workout, I can do that easier than others. If it's grueling, I can't even think other than just what I'm doing in that moment. But if it's like a brainless thing, like where you're just out for a jog or a walk, great time to do like that little prayer of gratitude. And then education. Now, that's things to help expand your mind or your learning. What is it that you're trying to learn right now? It could be listening to these podcasts or watching them right now on YouTube, right? Putting your earbuds and just do that while you're doing your workout too at the same time. It could be while you're driving to the work. It could be while you're dropping the kids off of school or after you've dropped them off because they're too noisy. It could be, doing all kinds of things that way, reading good books, all those things to really help you along your path of this journey, right? Trying to learn and become a student. You should be learning more than you ever did in traditional school. And that's the goal. So those 3 things absolutely put you in the best frame of mind and get you started for the day. Heck, you're my 3rd interview of the day, right back to back. If I'm out of it, if I'm not mentally alert and awake, you can tell, so I have to make sure that I can show up as my best, because that's what gets you the best results.
Yeah, that's great. I originally started, I guess, probably about 6-7 years ago now. I started with the Miracle Morning. I read the book. It it sort of resonated with me, and I knew that I needed something like that in my life. And, and I like that you just say, exercise, education, and enlightenment. I think it all sort of falls into those three, when you're talking about journaling and, reading and meditation, and I think they all sort of fall into the same realm. One of the reasons that I love to talk about this, because I think it affects everyone a little bit differently, but there's also a lot of similarity. For me personally, if I'm going to meditate, I have a difficult time meditating after I've run, right? So I sort of have to do the opposite. For me, I prefer to have my quiet time before I get up and do my running or exercising, whatever I'm going to do for the day. And then, and then the other part of that is, and I found this, I can't even drink a coffee before I meditate, or if not, it's hard for me to get my mind settled back in, that caffeine stimulus. So, so it's just sort of a same concept, but we both approach it in a different direction. So, that's part of the reason I love to have these conversations. Yeah. Same result at the end of the day, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah. It's just, that's what I tell people, they say, well, especially when it was Tony Robbins' hour of power, people are like, well, I don't have an hour. It's like, don't worry about the hour thing. You could literally do this in 20 minutes, all of it, if that, it's just, you can do like the whole 6-minute, kick your butt type workout, calisthenics or whatever. You could be listening to your earpods, or you could do, something different too, right? Or you could be meditating in the beginning or whatever. You can flip flop it and make it work. You can do it while you're driving. There's so many things you can do throughout the morning to make it work. It could be during breakfast. Some of those things I'll even do while I'm eating, So it just depends on your situation and where it works best for you.
So you mentioned that you're a marathoner. So any marathons coming up? What are you training for these days?
Yeah. So now, I ran the Chicago Marathon last year. I qualified for Boston, New York, but I chose Chicago. So now I'm going to try it again for Boston and New York. There's 6 majors. So we got like Boston, New York still left, and I've got London, Tokyo, and Berlin. Okay. So the hardest one was going to be Tokyo. But funny enough, while I was running one of my marathons in California, I met a Japanese guy. I used to live in Japan for a few years back in my when I was around 20. And I met this Japanese guy that's a doctor out in Pennsylvania. And as we're talking, he said, hey, have you done Tokyo yet? And I said, no, I haven't. He said, well, hey, let me know if you ever want to get in, because my dad's the CEO of Japan Airlines, who sponsors the marathon.
Oh, wow.
I can get you in. I can get you sponsored by Japan Airlines. I said, give me your phone number right now. You are going to be on my speed dial, because if I can't get in that marathon on my own merits, I'm calling you up. So I'm pretty excited that I'm trying to aim for 2024 for Tokyo.
Wow, that would be an amazing experience. So I haven't made it to marathon just yet. I do some triathlons, and I'm actually I'm prepping for my first official half marathon. I've run a couple of half marathons, but I've never been in a half marathon race. So I've run the distance. So I'm in the process of preparing for that now. That's in Atlantic City. So looking forward to that. I think I have 8 more weeks. So
that's incredible. Like every time people ask me, what about an Ironman? I said, don't even talk to me about an Ironman. I barely make it through my marathon. So don't add on biking and swimming too.
Cool. So I want to transition over to our final segment, where we ask the same questions of every guest, and really appreciate you giving so much information. This has been really, really cool. Very, very filled with knowledge for me, and also a bit of fun too. So first question for you, what is your definition of success?
I would say success is living the life that you're supposed to live, living true to you, and being able to show up to where you can ultimately serve people, right, to the highest level that you can, based on your gifts, your abilities, your talents, and everything that you've been given. I believe we've been given like these God-given gifts and abilities that are meant to serve, people worldwide. It could just be in your community, it could be in your family, of course, but I really view my family as being bigger than just my immediate family, with my wife and my 8 kids, right? It's really about something much bigger than that. Although it sounds hard to imagine it's bigger than 8 kids, but it is. It's how you show up to serve. And I think that's the real true definition of success: is what kind of footprint are you going to leave on this planet? What kind of legacy will you leave, and how will you bless people's lives while you're here?
Very cool. So next question for someone who is new to investing or even learning to focus on their goals and their path to success. Did you have a good book or recommendation you can give?
There's several. I'll avoid Rich Dad Poor Dad because everybody says that one, right? And that's a great one if you haven't done it. Killing Sacred Cows by my old partner Garrett Gunderson is a good one as well. Another one that's not as commonly known. I had him on my podcast, and he's a brilliant guy. Rabbi Daniel Lapin, as in Lapin. I don't know if you know him or not, but guy is brilliant. He wrote the book Thou Shalt Prosper. Such a great book to get a different perspective on money and a really more holistic approach to money.
I think my face just lit up when you mentioned that one. So that's a book that someone had recommended it to my wife a couple of years ago, and she read it and said, "You absolutely have to read this book." And it is an excellent book. I'm so glad you recommended it. I'm so glad that you brought it up because I think it's one that, is probably a little lesser known than Killing Sacred Cows, very good book. And obviously Rich Dad Poor Dad gets its fair share of mentions from time to time, but Thou Shalt Prosper by Rabbi Daniel Lapin is a very good one. And it was very eye-opening for me, just to think about how people from different religious backgrounds and different cultures talk about money with their family and how they educate their children about money. And it was just very, very eye-opening. And it's one that we reference from time to time in my house. So thank you so much for recommending that one.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you for coming on again. I really appreciate your time. This has been fun. For me personally, if you're ever in the Philadelphia area, New York, New Jersey, running a marathon or whatever, let me know. I'd love to catch up and maybe we can even get a run in. But how could we support you, and how could people reach out to you, contact you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here. My company's Money Ripples, right? We're trying to create a ripple effect of freedom and prosperity for people. So moneyripples.com. It's a great website to view, especially if you want to get that ebook, Beyond Rice and Beans, 7 Secrets to Free Up Cash Today. It's on there. You can download that for free. And also check out our Money Ripples podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, check it out.
Great. So final question for you, Chris, if you could think back to a young Chris around ages, 10 to 12 years old, knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to a young Chris, or really to any pre-teenage child, to help guide them towards success? I know that you mentioned that you have 8 children, so I'm sure you have a couple in that age range. So, what type of advice would you give to them?
Yeah, it's true. I've got 8 kids. 7 of them are between about 11 and 19 right now. So they're all in that age range. I would say this, here's what I wish that I would have been taught, and what we've kind of tried to help teach our kids. Number one is that dollars follow value, right? Like if I know with this generation, so many people want to become more entitled, thinking I should just get paid more money, but it always comes down to how well can you serve and solve problems for people, where money is just the natural byproduct. So really, dollars follow value. Like what kind of, figure out how you're going to create more value for more people to have more dollars. 2 is really that, start saving, right? Not just saving like some people would do, but really start to really build up that cash. Many people are like, I want to invest, my $2,000. Well, that's great. Build up some more cash, right? Like start saving more, get that habit of habitually saving and building that cash up so that you can do number 3, which is get that cash to then pay you income, passive income. And that's a big one we teach our kids too. We'll even have them kind of become investors with us in certain deals. They'll pool their money with our money, and then they get paid the returns off that investment, prorated. And so much more exciting, especially if when we started them with just doing savings accounts, and they're getting paid 0.nothing%. And then they're seeing like, whoa, I just made 1% this month, or even 0.5% this month. They're like, I just made in 1 month what I made in a year. So help them really see that, expand their mind about how important it is to create that passive income. You do that, and their lives will never be the same.
Excellent. Great advice. Thank you so much for coming on. Make sure you check him out, moneyripple.com. Chris Miles, thanks so much for checking out the Healthy Investor Podcast, and go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.